Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum students, and a very good day to all of you. I welcome you to the 12th lecture of report writing skills. So far, within the last two lectures and the one that we are going through in our today's lecture are dealing with the writing process, starting of course from the three stages. And stage 1 was about pre-writing, in which we have covered some of the pre-writing techniques to collect and assemble the data, to extract all the ideas from our mind and to jot it down in different forms based on those techniques that we are using. Then we proceeded onwards with stage 2, which is the actual writing, in which you start jotting down the content which you have extracted from your mind on a piece of paper or on a Word doc. We discussed some of the techniques as well as the examples in our previous lecture with respect to this stage 2, and now it is time that once we have this content on a piece of paper or a Word document, to make it perfect. And this perfection basically comes from our stage 3, which is the finishing, also known as the post-writing stage, the stage which comes after the writing is complete. Though when it comes to stage 2, you have written the text, you have jotted down all the ideas which you had in mind, but the reason why this stage is important is to remove all the errors which may become a source of embarrassment for you or may affect your credibility or the authenticity of the content. Therefore, you have this stage at the end of the writing process. But what it basically deals with, what do we mean when we say the post-writing stage? So there are basically certain steps it is referring to that you have to perform, and within these steps you're going to see some overlapping as well. Like once we are going through this content and the lecture, you realize that don't you think these are the points which can be covered or which were covered within the previous step as well? Well, these are part of the beauty of this stage, that you have to revert back and move forth in order to get the perfect text at the end of the writing process. And in order to remove all the errors, there is once again a need of applying these techniques one by one so that the output is free of all the errors. So if we move ahead and start looking at those steps or those techniques which are used within the post-writing stage, most of these are starting from the letter R, and you realize it all begins from responding. Then you of course move to revising your written content, the result of stage 2. You edit the content, you proofread the content, and finally you publish it. The reason why I have said that you're going to see some R's, as we move ahead you're going to see that within these steps are the approaches as well, which are starting from the letter R. And these are basically the techniques which are used to organize things and to help you remember the stages or the techniques and the approaches as well. We're going to look into it, but starting from our first step, and that is responding. Now, don't consider it to be the first step of this post-writing state, because as I mentioned earlier, take it as a cyclical process. It may happen again. For example, you got your response, you did the changes, and once again you want to move towards the final stage in which the text is complete, doesn't require anything except for another review. And let's suppose that review is giving you a response of coming up with some more changes. So don't you think it's happening again? So although a first step, but could be coming at the end as well and happening again and again till all the errors are removed. So we begin with this responding, the act of giving you a feedback. So this feedback can come on your own from yourself if you are doing this self-assessment by looking at the content yourself, or it can be the result of a peer evaluation. You have a colleague, you have a friend or a fellow who is assigned a similar task or working on the same topic. So you two can simply exchange your papers in which you have jot down all the points, and you can simply ask for the feedback of one another. You providing him or her the feedback, and he or she giving you the response with respect to the writing which you have created. So this is basically responding. Now once this responding is complete, then you realize that there is a need of me revising my own content rather than giving it to another peer. I have realized that there are errors once I was done with the writing process, and this content is requiring that revision. Revision. You have to view things once again just to realize that there are things which are missing, and you have to look into the details of those points. But what basically are you reviewing, or you are trying to revise? Well, there is a manner in which we categorize it, or what you basically have to look into the content when you are revising it. So it's basically about making a big picture changes. Big picture? Well, of course, your content is related to a topic, and for that topic you're coming up with some explanation, introduction, then coming up with body, and coming up with some supporting examples, some details, and finally moving towards the conclusion. So you have a body. But within this body, there are things to look upon. For example, if the structure is okay, is there anything which is extra, which is becoming a bit more or less irrelevant, trying to distract the reader, or trying to be a bit too much for the reader to grasp and to absorb and to understand from the points that you want to explain to him or her? So you will consider it to be a bit extra. And in order to avoid any sort of distraction, you would simply tell yourself that, how about if I remove this content and then give it a reading? Maybe still there is a coherence, there are links, and the reader is able to go through step 1 till the last step, and there won't be any issue in this process of comprehension. So this was just one example of why you revise, and basically for the big picture changes in the bigger picture of the whole content. We are looking at the text as a big whole rather than going into the details of within the paragraphs and within the sentences, because that will be something more narrow. And right now we are not trying to be more narrow, rather we are trying to look at broadly the overall structure. This is basically the first step, which is why it's called as revising. Of course, coming after this responding, so if you are moving in this stepwise procedure, take it as step 2. But when it comes to your own exercise, so this is the step in which you are looking at this content throughout its structure, starting from the first line till the very last line. So as I mentioned, your focus remains on removing whole sections. If you feel like this section is becoming a bit more confusing, you may remove it. If it is a need of rewriting an entire paragraph, you're going to rewrite it. And if there is something which is missing and you think that it's required and there is a need of an addition, you're going to add an information which the reader is also expecting. Then basically why I mentioned Now think of those R's I mentioned. The revision stage is sometimes summed up with this ARRR approach. So there is a way you can just think of any way of pronouncing it: A3R approach, AR cube approach, R approach. But the point is that it's basically to make it more easier for you to remember those approaches, those strategies and techniques through which you basically revise your content. Now looking to this ARRR approach, the first A refers to adding something. This R is basically for rearranging the basic content which you have written. The second R is for removing something, if you consider it to be something extra, irrelevant or distracting for your readers. And then comes the third R, which is for replacing. Rather than removing, if you feel like that something else would better fit over here or it can be substituted, then of course you're going to replace the existing content with another one. So this is basically the A3R approach, which is basically used for revising your content. In case of adding, before adding, these are the things which you should ask. What else a reader needs to know? If you haven't met the required word count, what areas could you expand? So in case of less word count and there is a space for you, so what could be added? This is the question that you need to ask yourself, and that will determine what information is relevant and can be added. So that's why, as I said, being a cyclical process and being overlapping in its nature, there's a point at which you can revert back and go to the first stage that we have talked about, the pre-writing. And if you don't want to do this pre-writing, even if you look at the already existing pre-writing which you have done by looking at the pre-writing notes, so that will also help you to extract some new ideas that you haven't talked about, although they were there within your mind, which is why you jotted them down in the form of clustering, free writing, listing, T-charts, anything. But if the ideas are there, you can just simply extract them over here and start jotting them down, moving to the second stage of writing, and then come to the third stage of revising and looking into the content. The R stage, or the strategy of rearranging. So there may be a situation in which sections can be rearranged. For example, there could be a possibility that at the first occasion you realize that this thing is more important and you are writing it first, but after giving it a break, after that peer review and your own self-review, you realized that this point turns out to be more important, which you have written in the middle or at the end, but as recommended by your friend, your peer, and your own analysis, you realize that it should really come at the top, and that will make the right order. So there is a possibility of rearranging, and this is the time in which you have to point it out for you to just simply come up with this change. Then not only the sections, but also reordering the paragraphs. Because as I mentioned within the writing stage as well, you try your best that compared to all those points which you consider to be important with respect to the topic, you still try to give them an order of importance, so that your reader may realize the writer is very much clear about the points that he or she is writing about. So you try to start or begin with the most important point, and then you move gradually and steadily forward, in which the points that you consider comparatively less important are coming afterwards. So there may be a situation in which you have missed it, or you realize that this was something less important, but after a passage of time, after that discussion, you want to change its location. You're going to rearrange or reorder this paragraphs arrangement for this better flow of argument. because this is the overall purpose of argumentation, coming up with some strong evidence. And if that order of evidence is right, then you're going to have this difference and the change of perspective when it comes to the mind of your readers. So that's how you have to rearrange the section in addition to reordering your paragraphs. Another possibility could be this short story which you have written, a possibility that it is packing up too much in the middle, and then there is a possibility that you are trying to lengthen it at the end. So not at the right sequence, not having this consistency within the structure. It should be well balanced rather than being deviating for your readers as well. Because at the end of the day, if they are saying that not much details were provided and all of a sudden so much detail within the conclusion may cause some confusion for your readers as well. So there is always a need to keep a perfect balance, and that's why you can rearrange the content to have a steady flow of argument, and of course for moving from more important thing to the less important. The next are removing. As I mentioned earlier, there are certain points, as written over here in red as well, which doesn't work out. You have written them, of course, as a result of this pre-writing strategy. You thought that these are the points which could be mentioned over here, but when you really started the writing process and writing about all those ideas, they were not fitting into the overall picture, overall body of the text, and that's why you feel like that if this point can be removed, so it will become more coherent, more logical. So this is the stage or the approach, the strategy through which you are in a position to remove that idea and everything which you have talked about it, so that better connection and link can be established between the information which is already existing within the text. Again, there is another reason, and that is of a word count. For example, you are provided officially with a word count and you are told not to overdo or overwrite compared to this word count. So again, there is a need of removing, and based on this criteria of those ideas which are not as strong as the other ideas, so there is always a space of removing this information and making it more attractive and having a good format to be more attractive for your reader. If you look at this example, so of course a funny story which is not really fitting with the rest of your article, so it's really indicating the fact that this thing is something which is distracting your readers, and you have to basically avoid these distractions. Therefore, it's a must to use this strategy in order to remove anything which is not fitting into the actual body of your text. So there is a space of it, and that's why we have this second R which we have used of this A3R approach. And finally, looking at this replacement, so if you can find anything which is more relevant, more logical, and which is going to create this coherence with the rest of the content, and you feel like that this replacement is very much needed over here, for example, asking yourself this question of, would more vivid details help bring your writing to life? This is the actual purpose of this third stage, that you want to make your writing lively, active, and more indulging and involving for your readers. So adding some more details isn't going to make the difference instead of the information which is already existing. So this is like a choice for you, and you have to just think of it that it's the option which has to be taken right now just to make it more lively. So that's how you do it. And basically you have to think of adding some strong examples and quotations. That is how you basically replace the content which is already existing. And of course you have to rewrite the paragraphs as well wherever needed, so that the pre-existing paragraph can be replaced with the new paragraph which you have written, because the one reason of this could be that you write things for the first time, so it's your first experience, there is a possibility of more errors. Compared to the second time which you are writing on the same topic, but based on that experience, this time your writing would be more perfect and better. An improvement would be visible, clearly much evident when we talk about rewriting paragraphs. So that is how this rewriting also becomes important. After studying this stage of revising and looking at the approach, the A3R approach, we are now going to look into some examples to see how we can make a difference, how we can bring a change by this strategy of revision. And this comparison is going to show you the difference as well. For example, you'll be involved within this exercise as well. It's like a task for you, that revise the following sentences to avoid flabby expressions, long lead-ins, and unnecessary there is, it is kind of fillers. Lead-in means that the kind of line which is leading you towards the actual matter being discussed within a line. So you can say something very straight away, and there is a way of first of all coming up with so many words that the other person may get distracted. That why aren't you coming to the point? As we're going to just see the basic difference between these two approaches. This email message is to inform you that there is a new health benefit plan available for the employees. This email is to inform you. Again, long lead in towards the new health benefit available. So how about if we just revise it and change it to a new health benefit plan is available for the employees? Do you see the advantage of revising and changing these long lead-ins, which can overall have a big impact on your writing? I would like to take this opportunity to inform everyone, rather than this long lead-in, we probably will win the contract, as it is visible over here within these lines as well. So this is basically the difference. The purpose of mentioning it over here was the same, that you have to revise for coming up with such changes. Something which is extra can be removed, can be replaced, can be revised to make your writing more perfect and better. Following sentences would simply show you how you can create conciseness within a lengthy sentence, as in addition to the above, there are contracts that are attached here too. How about two contracts are also attached? Do you see the difference? Just look at the word count as well. That is how you create conciseness. Despite the fact that most information is posted on the company intranet, please feel free to call whenever necessary. Although most information is posted on the company intranet, please call whenever necessary. So that is how you have to restructure, replace some new words over the words which you are using or which you have used within your draft, developed or created from the second stage writing process or drafting. You look at some other ones. By revising the following sentences, you have to avoid the redundancy, dull and overused expression and jargons and slangs to make it more attractive, to make it more comprehensible. So, by avoiding these things which are already existing in this example, Miss Miller, who shoots straight from the shoulder, coming up with an expression, demanded final completion by January 1. Miss Miller, who is straightforward, demanded completion by January 1. So, starting from those long lead-ins till coming up with these and such expressions, and if you change them by revising, can create such difference. Pursuant to your request enclosed, please find a check of $150. As you requested, a check for $150 is enclosed. So, just look at the situation in which you are writing, then just think of the exact and the right choice of words at the right time, keeping in view the context in which you are writing, and your revision is going to make really a difference. In the following sentences, you basically have to look into the use of verbs, the excessive use of verbs, and the exuberance. The manner in which you try to make your text more lively. So keep it at a normal pace. Don't try to be more energetic from your writing. Keep it at a normal pace. Just the example is going to show you how you can keep a check over the use of excessive verbs as well as this exuberance. The seller said that he definitely would contact you. So many verbs: said, would, and contact. The seller promised to email, telephone, or fax you. Story is over. Very brief, by simply controlling the use of verbs. We must give encouragement to our team. We must give encouragement to our team. We must encourage our team. So why giving encouragement when you can just simply encourage your team? So this is just a simplified example of how you get a change by revising using the A3R approach. But the point here is that you can really make a difference once you go through this stage 3 of post writing and apply these strategies, these approaches to change, revise, replace, rearrange, reorder, so many R's once again. But the point is to come up with a better form of the text. Another one for you, as you can see over here, rather than writing it in this form, now we know the significance of bullets and vertical list as well. It helps to organize things. So there are certain points which are written over here. The trainer will demonstrate how to do this, how to do that, creating podcast, sharing multiple programs, and maintaining an internet directory. That is how you can write it. These are the tasks which will be demonstrated. You look towards improving the readability of the following instruction, which will become, of course, part of students' employment booklet. So these are the details, but instead of writing them in such haphazard form, if we just write it in the form of bullets, can really do the job. That will make it more legible, more comprehensible, more organized and structured. So this is the ideas which are basically developed as a result of this revision. And even in case of your response coming from the peer review or peer evaluation, you're going to get the same ideas from your peer as well. Now once this revision is complete, you can now look to the next overlapping stage, which is basically coming from this stage of revision. Once you have revised, now you're in a position to come up with some editing. So first you revise something, you do this revision of the content which you have written, and based on this revision you can now move towards the editing process. Now just to give you and to make it more interesting, I talked about revision, that you look at the text as a whole, you look at the bigger picture. To make this editing more easier for you to understand, now you go into that body and you start looking into the details of that body, the manner in which the overall body has been structured, the manner in which paragraphs have been arranged, the manner in which one sentence is leading towards the other, which means that you are looking towards spelling, the grammar, the sentence structure, the logic, whether is there any digression happening or not. So these are the things which you are observing when it comes to your editing. As I can say that in case of your earlier stage of revising, the focus was towards this natural flow of communication, and you are coming up with some supporting details, and even if you consider it necessary, you try to reread it as well for this process of revision. But to make it more easier, once we move from this stage of revising and looking at the body as a whole, and we enter into this editing process, you look towards some other things, talking about Is it moving logically? Is the scope clearly identified within your writing? Is there any digression happening? Whether the writer is speaking of the subject or not? Is he or she staying focused towards the topic or not? Now, if we talk about this stage of editing, your focus would remain on looking at the depth of the information being provided within the text, whether it's there or not. If there is anything which is becoming like an irrelevant detail, of course you would recommend that it has to be removed. Then of course you look at whether is there any gap within the logical sequence, the logical flow of information. That means you're looking at the clarity of the information within this phase of editing as well, and you're going to bring the change as well. Within the gaps of information which is being provided within the text, whether is there any gap in the information, something is missing or creating this vacuum, then of course there will be a need that you will also realize of defining terms as well. So these are some of the factors that you consider when it comes to your editing. Just a brief overview. But now if we look into the detail, it is distinct from revision. As you are moving from this phase of revision towards the editing, basically it is giving you this close-up view of individual sentences and words. Like I mentioned earlier as well, that in case of your previous stage of responding and revising, you're looking at the body as a whole. But once you move towards editing stage, now you have a clear close-up view of the information being provided within the text. You'll be looking at the paragraphs, their logical arrangement, the manner in which sentences are being constructed, so that nothing is missed out. There shouldn't be any gap in logic or any information being provided. Something or anything is not being missed out to create confusion for your readers. So this is basically what you do within the editing process. And basically it needs to be done once you are done with the revision on a big scale. And of course, when editing, you have to go through your piece of writing line by line. So this is basically the point to be noted here, making the difference from the revision as well. Over there you were looking at the body as a whole, sentence structure, paragraph structure, and your textual structure. But over here you will be going through line by line to identify the errors and to suggest the changes, making it as strong as possible to have an impact over your readers. Now the manner in which you do the editing and the manner in which you identify the errors, of course one problem could be that you are using one term time and again and again. So that will become the cause of redundancy. And the manner of avoiding this redundancy is the use of Thesaurus. Thesaurus is also available in the Microsoft Office Word document. The option is clearly much evident over there. You right click on the word, you see the option of Thesaurus, it will give you the alternatives that you can simply use over here. Otherwise Thesaurus is itself available as well, which will give you the alternative of word, but you have to keep in view the context in which you want to use that word, because the alternatives are there. The computer will give you the options, but it doesn't know the kind of context in which you want to use the alternative word. You will be deciding whether this word really fits into the environment in which you are using the word or not. Again, sometimes sentences are hard to understand, which means you have to rewrite them to make them more clear. Another way of editing is that you have to cut or remove expressions such as just or quite or very, really, generally, because these can be removed, not very much necessary when it comes to your written content, because these are certain words that I would or I might be using as well unconsciously within my spoken communication while delivering my lecture. But when it comes to your written form, you have the space of removing them, because they are actually not giving you any space of thinking. But in case of delivering a lecture, these are the words in which your mind is working and you extract the right word at the right time. In the meanwhile, you're using or uttering these words. So these are the words which can be avoided when it comes to your written form. Then you have to look for the subject-verb agreement, whether the subject being used or the verb being used with the subject actually fits as per the rules, as per the agreed rules and conventions of English language, or if there is an error, how can I omit the error, how can I remove it to make it better. And you have to look at the use of tense as well, whether I'm using the right tense or not. And basically it's the consistent use of tense. We have been learning, and it's basically a convention as well, that once you start writing and you have chosen a tense, be it past, present, but you have to stick to it. Be consistent, because I used to do this error as well, as identified by my teachers as well, that at times while I was just freely writing, because that is basically free writing, you get the perfect picture once you get a feedback. My teachers used to tell me that sometimes you hop from one tense to the other. Stay consistent, and that is something which I would recommend to you as well, that stay focused while you are doing this editing and identify whether you have shift from one tense to the other, and if that is the case, be consistent, change it to a single form of the tense. And of course you have to look towards the spelling as well. In case you have used the wrong spelling, this is the space in which you can do the changes as well. You rely on the spell checker, so that is of course a help that you are getting from the computer, from your PC, from the office software, but that is also tentative. Why? Because if I give you the example of these two words, TO2 and TOO2, there is nothing wrong with the orthography, the spelling of these words, both are okay, but basically it's the context which is determining which one of these two has to be used within a sentence construction. So the spell checker will say green signal, let it go. You will be the one to realize that this word does not fit into the context in which it is being used. Then of course you look into the punctuation marks as well, whether these are being used correctly or not, the use of commas, and you have to do this. You have to check out this daily writing tip articles on punctuations as well, just to realize how to use these punctuations as well. We'll look into it as well. Now next points to be noted here is that editing is where things like grammar, spelling and mechanisms are checked and refined. The reason why is that now the focus is no longer broad. You have started to scrutinize things, looking into them very closely. So this grammar, this spelling and mechanism means the manner in which you are moving from one information to the other. So what's your mode? Everything is being checked, and this is the place where you have the space of adding something, removing something. If you consider it, it will make it better. So this is the point to do these things, and that is why grammar, spelling and mechanism are to be checked and refined. Rereading, of course, key part of the editing, because you want to make sure everything fits into the big picture. So of course you have to do this rereading as well. Reading aloud is also another good strategy when we talk about the editing, because once you read aloud, you are not only telling this to yourself that it's your content, but you read it as though the information is being heard and coming from a source, and then this element of objectivity is developed, and that is why you look and critically analyze the information which you are hearing, which you are listening to, and that's why there is a bigger chance of you identifying the errors if they really are existing within the information. Ensure that the formatting, of course, is also correct. Formatting is once again related to the overall structure, so it has to be checked as well, whether you have used the right font size, the headings, the size, the underlining, the use of bullets, the italics, everything has been used in a refined form. If there is some sort of error, of course, once again the point in which you can remove it. And the reason why I'm calling it as the last process of writing your document is that once you have done it, then comes the stage in which you are basically identifying the errors, or basically it's the stage in which you are not doing writing at a bigger scale. Now, very minor errors would be appearing within your content and the information. And as we move ahead, you're going to see what are those minor errors which are even missed after these stages of post writing as well. Because now, from broader to narrower, we are going to make it even more narrow, study and scrutiny of your content. And that is basically done by the next step of proofreading. What basically is proofreading? So of course, the reading itself is telling you that it's the last step, and within this step basically you are reading for very minor errors which have been missed out, and you basically try your best to remove those errors so that it may be in the final and perfect form, and which can be published, which can be shared, and now can be read by the larger audience. So this is the last step, and then very narrow and a strategy which is used for a deeper scrutiny of your content. The final phase, and for the final check and fix all the mechanical or technical flaws which were even missed by your revision and your editing. So these are the things which you have to check. A final check on your grammar, a final check on your punctuation, names and numbers, and of course the spelling as well. For example, as I gave you the example of the word to and two, so they seem like as though they are okay because their spellings are okay, but the problem comes within the context, and you call these two words as homophones. They are generally and linguistically known as the homophones, the words which have this same sound pattern, the same pronunciation, but the manner of their orthography or spelling is different. So this proofreading is basically used to check for these homophones if they have been used incorrectly, and if these are used incorrectly, it can be corrected and rectified. So focus on spelling, grammar, punctuation, names and numbers, and format. And of course checking the different elements of layout as well, whether headings, paragraph, illustrations and colors have been used in a correct format, or if there is any error, it can be highlighted or pointed out as well. This is also a point to be noted here, as you will see in the upcoming slides as well. Now, what to watch for when we talk about this step of proofreading? These are the things that you are basically checking within the final content, which has gone through the stages of responding, revising, editing, and now the stage of proofreading. You give a final check to the spellings of the words. You check what kind of things are already inserted or what needs to be inserted. If there is anything deleted within the previous stages, what were these stages? What were those words or phrases? And what else is still there and can be deleted? Then of course, in case of a need of capitalization, if that's not the case, you're going to highlight it. Then a need of using the punctuation marks, you're going to use it as well. Then talking about the application of names and numbers, that is also something that you will check. If there is a need of adding numbers, or if there is a need of mentioning some names, you're going to point it out as well, and giving it an overall look and check over the format, whether the right format has been used or not. In case that is not the case, you're going to pinpoint it as well. Where are the points in which there is a deviation from the font which has to be used, or the format is not being followed in the manner in which it was provided. So this is like a final check for all these things, so that you can move and proceed onwards towards the last stage, which basically is a stage also very important and takes you toward making it more accessible for the audience, and we're going to move towards it. But for now, talking about proofreading, there are basically certain guidelines, like a checklist for you as well, to become a beginner of this proofreading. What you basically have to do is you have to go through these phases of reviewing or proofreading, and these will help you, will provide you some guidelines of going through the proofreading stage or the proofreading strategy. So if we start from the first page of reviewing, you have to check whether the appropriate format has been used, whether the style is consistent, headings are used, the terminologies are rightly used, the proper spacing and font is there, then the correct numbering of figures and tables is there. You check all these things. This is your first thing to focus on when it comes to your proofreading. So you check at the overall layout. Once this is complete, then comes your second phase of review or proofreading, where you start analyzing the text, looking for the grammar usage, looking for the problems which are there. Then you move towards punctuation, whether there are any punctuation errors. Then you talk about those abbreviations which are being used. So are they used appropriately, or if there is any error, you're going to point it out. Then you talk and you look and you analyze all the email references which are being used. In case I missed it out, capitalization is also very much important. You have to check for the spelling as well. Then whether the data being analyzed is accurate, or the data being provided, is it accurate or not being provided within the tables and list. And of course, in case of any cutting or pasting, so whether you have used it correctly, or in case there is any error, you're going to point it out again. So this will be like the components of your second phase, which you do once the overall layout has been checked. The final phase review asks you to check for the following components within your proofreading. You have to survey of your overall goals. For example, looking at the content, you will ask whether the audience needs and purpose has been clearly defined, and whether the text is in accordance with the overall needs and purpose of the audience. So that is basically a target. If that is the case, you're going to check it. Appearance of the document, the overall design, and then reviewing by a trusted colleague, especially for crucial documents. So that is also something that you have to check. It basically once again refers back to that peer evaluation which you do at the very beginning related to responding. So a bit touch of this layout over here. At the beginning of this proofreading, you give a picture, you look at the picture, then you look at the text, whether things are properly arranged, all the things which are required are there or not. And once you are about to give a green signal, the last look at the layout. So that's how it's there within the first phase and the final phase, and in addition to all those other steps which are to be checked by you once you have finalized and you have given them a big go. Now this is very helpful for you to remember in case you are required to proofread any document which has been finalized based on the post-writing strategies of responding, revising, and editing. So once it has gone through it, these are basically the marks which are used for proofreading a text, especially when it comes to proofreading a text in the form of this piece of paper. So if you are provided some information, written or typed information in a piece of paper, and you are provided with a pen, then these are the marks which basically you are supposed to use for proofreading. So if you look at these marks, this mark has to be used for deletion. You basically see a line, and within that line you find something a phrase or a word or a line, even a paragraph that you think is irrelevant, you're going to place it at the top, which means that you have to delete it. For capitalization, this is the sign. For instead of capitalizing, you have to make it smaller, make it of lowercase. This is the mark to place. For transposition, changing the position of words, then you place this sign. For there are certain occasions in which when I myself sometimes while typing, so cannot, sometimes we write can and not separately, where even the spell checker and the grammar checking of Microsoft Word identifies the error, tells me that you have to simply close it up. So that cannot becomes one word. So basically this is a sign to use when you have to mark this thing that it has to be closed up. For inserting a word, this is the word to be used. For inserting a space between two words, you have to use this mark. This hashtag, linguistically speaking, refers to a space. Creating a space, and for inserting a space means you have to use this symbol. Inserting a punctuation or a comma means you have to insert this comma, as you can see over here. Inserting a period means full stop, you have to use this sign. And if you want to say, rather than writing just in a steady flow, without having any break between the text in the form of paragraph, then you have to place this sign over the point where you want that from this point onwards you have to start a new paragraph. So that's how these signs become very much important, and the manner in which you can use these signs is this. If you look at this example, a text which has been written for you right now, this text looks a bit confusing because it has been proofread by a teacher. So over here, as you can see, it's a marked copy, and looking at the first line, this is the symbol, and this symbol is clearly indicating that you have to remove this. This is to inform you. You move ahead, this is another mark for you. A month has to be written in capitalized letter, so this September's S has been written in lowercase, which has to be corrected as well. You look at this point, so after the date there should have been a punctuation mark of a comma which is missing, that's why you have to insert a comma. Then an indication of lowercase. Look over here, there is a need of inserting a space over here, and then you talk about this area over here. It is saying that you have to remove it with doors, a replacement, an insertion of doors, then an insertion of semicolon. Then look at this close-up, cannot. Again, this example, I gave my own reference, but over here the reference is here as well, but it's not my writing personally, it's an example for you. So over here you can use this word rather than utilize, that's why it has been referred. And over here in this, at this point, it's saying that you have to remove the S so that it may become exits rather than exist. So you can see the manner over here. I found another one. I wanted to show you the application of all the marks, and almost I was able to find it, luckily. So this is transposition. You have to change it so that it may be read as alarms rather than alarms. So there is a need of transposition. So a good example, you can do this practice as well by giving yourself a task or writing a text very quickly, and then the other fellow can simply proofread it for you based on these marks which you have learned by this lecture. So it's a good strategy. Just try to remember the marks, and once you will practice this proofreading, you'll be able to memorize these marks as well of deletion and insertion. Insertion is being used with almost all the punctuation marks. You basically have to write that letter that you want to insert under this banded triangle. So this is basically what you have to do when it comes to the proofreading. This is like another example. making it more formal, more official. This is the kind of proofreading which has been done of an inter-office memo. And look at the manner in which the words are recommended for being inserted, for deletion, again deletion, deletion. This one becomes a bit more restricted to the use of insertion and deletion. But the previous example was more or less related to the application of all the marks, just to make you realize how you can use those proofreading marks. Hope it turned out to be interesting for you as well, the application of these marks. Just give it a try, write something, do this quick writing so that it may be of some errors as well. Give it to your friend, give it to your fellow, and then just tell him or her to do this proofreading based on the marks that you have learned today. And you can just take his or her writing as well to learn the application of these marks yourself as well. But once again, the point remains that it is something which you can do on a page. In case of a Word document, it will be a bit different. And basically, we're going to look into it as well. This will be the last stage of your whole writing process. Finally, the stage is here that your writing is complete. Nothing to worry about, no more errors, no more mistakes which will be highlighted. You have passed all the signs which were simply telling you that it's a red light. No more red lights, now it's just the green light. You can move ahead, now you can publish your content. Publishing doesn't mean that it has to be there in a book form, shouldn't be there on a journal, shouldn't be there in a magazine. Publishing basically means that you share it, you get this opportunity of sharing your work with your target audience. And now you and me are well aware of the fact that the media has developed, the mode of communication and sharing your written form have advanced. Now there are multiple forms in which you can just, and you are always writing. We all know the fact. There are different modes in which we are just sharing our writing, be it small or long, but this is something which we are doing, so we publish it. But the manner of doing it and doing it in an official manner and the long writing requires such steps, and it will always help you to make your writing perfect. So this is also another step to be noted here, that you basically secure co-authorship and copyright permission as well. Because as we all know, we do this writing, and within our writing we have and we cite certain sources as well. We cite the works of different authors as well. Sometimes we are using the works of different people, we are giving their references as well. So instead of just making it seem like as though you have written something or it's your own idea, you basically cite the author and provide its clear-cut and detailed reference at the end of your work once your writing is complete. So you basically provide these end details in the form of a reference list or a bibliography as well, to avoid basically this copyrights issue. To secure copyrights, you do this publishing as well, and you do these references, you provide these references as well to get affected from these copyrights issue as well. If you are referring to someone, if you are citing someone, so you have to provide the details within the bibliography. And once you publish your own writing, so it secures the copyrights as well. Once you are cited or once you are quoted at some forum as well, so permission will be taken from you, whether we should cite you, whether can we use your work, or if your work is being used, so you will be cited, so that the main source may not be ignored while their ideas are being referred to or while their ideas are being discussed within some new form of writing. So this is basically the step when it comes to your publishing. Now this is basically a cycle that I believe would not look that much complex to you, and it is basically no longer that difficult, because if you look at it very closely, you realize that it's just turning it into a cycle which happens again and again. It's a cyclical process. You have to write and you have to go through all these stages. It's just for your own guidance, and to make it short for you to understand what points to do and at what point are you once you're doing the writing. So it will help you to just give you the guidance. It's like a road map to your treasure, and that treasure is basically over here. You basically reach your destiny. You start from here, you gradually move through all these stages, and this is your treasure, the treasure island. So just keep in mind all the points, nothing should be missed out, and in this way you will know how to begin the writing process. Whenever you have to write something, you will know how to extract all the ideas. Once you have jotted down all the ideas by giving them the form of clusters, list, or any other, you will begin writing the content. You will prepare your draft. You may write your draft again based on the errors which you have committed. Even if you get convinced, you have to move towards the next stage, and that is taking responses from your peers, then doing this revision, then doing the editing. Again, the story does not come to an end. It has to be proofread as well, and this proofreading would also identify very minor errors, as you have just seen, that this minor errors of capitalization, spacing, deletion and insertion can really have a big impact over your writing. So if you avoid these by going through all these stages, you will not face any issue at the end of the day, and your writing would be perfect. And now, be it any form of writing, you go through the steps, you can write anything. All it demands is a practice, and if you're doing this practice, you'll do it perfectly.
Like the previous lecture, in this summary we are going to assume we have a character which we'll call Kaz. He thought he had finished his assignment for HUM102, that was, until he received a message from a classmate via WhatsApp. And so, Kaz planned to spend the rest of the day on his PlayStation are gone, because now he has more work to do.
Did you finish the assignment?
Yes, I have. And it's ready for submission.
Wow, nice mate. But did you post-write it?
Post-write? What's that?
And that's bad news for him because he doesn't know what to do. In particular, he doesn't know how to generally post-write his assignment, the stages that need to be followed, and how to proofread and respond to it. That is until he got his hands on this lecture. So, Kaz needs to understand that his assignment needs to initiate a response, be revised for content and proofread and edited for perfect grammar and flow. And of course, he needs to publish his assignment, which means that he needs to turn it in. The first step, which is responding, requires Kaz to evaluate his own assignment for any shortcomings. It's always a good idea to ask a friend to do the same so that common points may immediately be worked upon. Revision of his assignment should ideally follow what's called the R approach. That is, adding content to fill any gaps, rearranging paragraphs and sentences to make flow better, removing any redundancies or contradictions and replacing them with something better. The next stage, called the editing stage, requires a close inspection while keeping the bigger picture in mind. Kaz should really pay attention to this stage as this provides more strength to his assignment. This is different from proofreading, which pays attention to grammar, punctuation, names, numbers, and formattings without regard to content. And of course, once he's done with all of this, he can turn his assignment in. And now, Kaz can be happy, who can now post-write his assignment by revising, editing, and finally submitting it. Be like Kaz.
So if I give it a conclusion, we have successfully completed the writing process, and in our today's lecture we started with the post-writing technique. Now just look at the manner in which we have covered all these strategies. Writing itself seems like a process that you do for few minutes, but it basically demands this detailed exercise, and that is why it was discussed in detail as well. So hopefully these examples and techniques would be helpful for you once you start coming up with your own writing. Just one point that I would like to mention over here is that these examples and these techniques were explained to you with reference to the writing, and that is why I told you the marks as well. But now I'll be telling you how to simply use your Microsoft Office Word document for editing, for tracking the changes, for adding comments. So let's move to this section as well. I welcome you once again, dear students. And now over here we have this Microsoft Office Word document open here in front of us. And I'm going to teach you how you can do this editing and proofreading when it comes to a content provided to you within Microsoft Word document. Right now it's a blank document, but let's say if I write something as we are studying report writing skills and so on and so forth. It would be information provided to you in multiple lines. But let's say you provide this document in which this line and further lines have been written, and or it has been provided to you by some other person who wants you to check it. So there are two things which you can do. If you want him or her to do the editing, you're going to go towards review. For example, over here at this point you want to add some sort of comment. So right after this I'll just say review, and I'll pick this option of new comment. As I'm using the Microsoft Office of this person, that's why this name has appeared. Otherwise your own name would appear over here as well, and you can add simply any kind of comment over here. As I will say, you need to add the course code in addition to the name. Now this thing has been saved along with the skills. Whenever you will touch this, you have a comment for this. You have this. If you want to see the comment, that is how it will appear. This is the comment, and you can see over here it is referring to that with respect to this word. This is the comment that need to add the course code in addition to the name as well. That's how you can add multiple comments in your Microsoft Word document, and once you save it, this document, whenever it will be opened by the person for whom you are doing this editing or proofreading, so these comments would be visible to him or her as well. Now this task has been complete. If you have to do some changes as well, and now you want those changes to be visible to the person for whom you are doing the editing and proofreading, so there is another step which you have to do, and that is basically you have this option. Generally the Microsoft Office document opens and that is the visibility, that is the interface, these are the icons which are visible. You will go to review. Within this review you have this option of track changes. You're going to click over it, and this click has turned this option on. Now whatever you're going to do will be changed and it will be tracked as well. For example, rather than calling it report writing skills, if I change it to communication skills, that is also another subject, or any kind of change. Now this thing has placed a mark over here as well, and this mark would remain once you save it. You save it, this mark is going to stay over here, and this red mark will simply show that some sort of change has been done by the person who has checked, who has reviewed, and who has edited the content. But now if you really want to see what sort of change has been done, you'll go over here on the right hand side of this icon of track changes, jot it down and click on all markup. This all markup would show you the word which was written by that person or by the person who has checked, This is the word which has been replaced. Report writing was the word which was there in the original document. If you want to see the original document, click on the original. So over here it was written report writing. Then you say, show me all the markup changes which were done. So report writing was changed with the communication skills. And now, based on this checking, you want to simply accept the change. So you will click on accept. And this accept is going to replace your previous word with the new one. So as you can see, that word has automatically been replaced with the new one which you have used. So communication skills is over. And you talk about these skills, as I wrote over here, that need to add the course code in addition to the name as well. So you can simply delete the comment, and based on the instruction you can simply write HUM103 or any sort of instruction as provided to you within the document. You can do the changes as well. So this was just a brief overview of how you can track your changes, track the changes which has been done by the teacher, and it will be helpful for you once you're doing this editing, proofreading and changes within a Microsoft Word document. Hope it is helpful for you. Just give it a try. In case of any problem, you can always discuss your query with your teachers. Thank you.